Have you ever witnessed something so wrong that silence felt like betrayal? On a grey London afternoon in 2016, inside an upscale Mayfair tea room, a 6-year-old girl named Emma stood frozen beside a linen-draped table, tears sliding quietly down her cheeks. Her mistake was painfully ordinary. Her tiny, trembling hands had spilled a cup of Earl Grey onto a saucer while serving customers. That was all. Yet the punishment was swift and cruel. Mrs. Chen, the tea room owner's wife, seized Emma's wrist and berated her in front of the entire room. She threatened to withhold wages Emma didn't actually receive, demanded she pay for the ruined china, and scolded her with a fury that made customers shift uncomfortably in their seats. 23 people sat with their tea, staring at anything except the crying child. But one man in the corner booth couldn't look away. What followed would unravel a hidden crisis, force a nation to confront the reality of modern slavery, and prove that courage often begins the moment politeness ends. Emma wasn't an employee. She was a trafficked child domestic worker, brought from the Philippines under false promises of education and opportunity. Her parents believed she would attend school and help the family hosting her. Instead, she worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, cleaning, caring for the family's children, and occasionally serving at their tea room. She received no wages, no schooling, and slept on a thin mat in a storage closet. The Chens called her family. In reality, she was a trapped, invisible servant. Globally, the International Labour Organization estimates around 10 million children are domestic workers, many in conditions indistinguishable from slavery. Anti-slavery groups in the UK believe thousands of minors live in domestic servitude behind the doors of ordinary homes. They work in kitchens we've eaten in, clean buildings we walk through, and serve in businesses we frequent. We see them, but we don't look. Not really. Comfortably ignoring exploitation has become a collective habit. Emma's life with the Chens had grown harsher as their financial stress mounted. Once merely strict, they became openly abusive. She was called stupid, ungrateful, clumsy. She received poor food, had no personal belongings, and endured psychological isolation. By the time she spilled the cup of tea, she had learned that accidents meant punishment, not compassion. When the tea spilled, Emma's terror cracked through the polite quiet of the tea room. Mrs. Chen's fingers dug into Emma's wrist as she shouted about broken china and carelessness. The little girl stood still, as though shrinking might make her vanish. Several customers sensed something was wrong, though most clung to polite inaction. But the man in the corner, David Richardson, saw more than a tense scene. He was a human rights lawyer who had spent over a decade handling trafficking cases. He noticed the ill-fitting clothes, the chemical burns on Emma's hands, her rigid posture, her absolute silence. Most telling was her gaze, fixed on Mrs. Chen with the intensity of someone monitoring a threat. To David, the signs were unmistakable. He approached quietly and crouched beside Emma. "Are you all right?" he asked. Such a simple question, but for Emma, it was shocking. No one had asked about her well-being in months. She opened her mouth, but fear locked the words inside. Mrs. Chen attempted a sugary smile. "She's fine. Children need discipline." But David wasn't interested in the performance. "How old is she?" he asked. "What hours does she work?" "That's none of your business," Mrs. Chen snapped, trying to pull Emma away. "She's like family." It was the phrase David had heard from countless exploiters. He dialed the modern slavery helpline right there, speaking calmly while watching Mrs. Chen's panic rise. When she tried to drag Emma toward the back, he blocked the path. Other customers, emboldened by one person's courage, stood up too. Cameras were raised. The silence was broken. Police and social workers arrived within minutes. Emma was taken into protective custody. A search of the Chen home uncovered the truth: the storage closet she slept in, her single set of clothes, and a hidden diary filled with heartbreaking entries in uneven handwriting. "Today I clean 15 hours. I miss Mama. I break glass. Mrs. hit me. I so tired. When do I go to school like promised?" The Chens were arrested. But the case expanded far beyond them. Investigators discovered a trafficking pipeline moving children from the Philippines into domestic servitude across London. Many were brought in on tourist visas, their legal vulnerability weaponized against them. Emma's rescue ultimately led authorities to 43 more children hidden in similar circumstances. A national conversation erupted. How had this been happening in plain sight? The uncomfortable answer: because people saw, but chose not to see enough to act. Reports later showed the average UK resident encounters a potential trafficking victim at least once per year but dismisses their intuition out of discomfort or fear of being wrong. David never sought attention, but the case made him a public voice in anti-trafficking advocacy. He spoke on news programs, trained businesses and schools to spot signs of exploitation, and helped shape new policies. His message was simple: you don't need expertise to intervene, just humanity and the willingness to risk awkwardness. Emma's healing was long and fragile. She entered foster care with specialists in trauma recovery. Small freedoms overwhelmed her. The first time her foster mother asked what she wanted for dinner, she cried because no one had asked her preference in nearly 2 years. Choosing clothes, playing, attending school, things other children take for granted, became steps toward reclaiming a stolen childhood. Meanwhile, the Chens were sentenced to prison. The agency responsible for bringing Emma to the UK was dismantled. New laws strengthened domestic worker protections, and public awareness campaigns grew. None would have happened if David had simply finished his tea and walked away. 7 years later, Emma, now 13, lives with an adoptive family and dreams of becoming a teacher. She still struggles with trust, still wakes from nightmares, but she has a future. When asked what changed her life, she doesn't talk about the spilled tea. She talks about the stranger who refused to pretend she was invisible. Mr. David saw me, she said. He showed me I mattered. David admits he'd ignored his instincts on earlier visits. He'd sensed something was wrong, but fear of misinterpreting the situation held him back. It wasn't until that cup of tea hit the tablecloth that he finally pushed past hesitation. He wonders how many other Emmas he walked past in his life. Modern slavery thrives because ordinary people avoid uncomfortable truths. 40 million people worldwide are trapped in forced labor. 10 million are children. Many are not far away, they are in homes, restaurants, construction sites, and shops we pass daily. Their suffering survives because bystanders convince themselves it isn't their responsibility. Emma's story teaches us that injustice doesn't survive because it is hidden, it survives because people look away. Silence is not neutrality, it is complicity. David Richardson wasn't extraordinary. He simply refused to participate in collective blindness. That refusal saved a child, exposed a criminal network, changed laws, and sparked a movement. Your moment may not be dramatic, but it will come. Maybe it already has. A nanny who never leaves the house. A young restaurant server who seems terrified. A worker who always looks exhausted while someone else answers for him. These moments matter.